So welcome back to part two of our special with Professor Prithwiraj Choudhury. In part one, we explored the global movement behind work from anywhere. Today, we turn to India. Can work from anywhere be a lever for inclusive growth, better policy, and a more knowledgeable economy? Let's dive in. You recently met Prithwiraj, the India's chief economic advisor, to present your ideas. What was that conversation like? Was there openness in the government to enabling policies that support work from anywhere?
Yeah, so the thesis that I presented to the CEA and the officers in the Indian Economic Services cadre was that work from anywhere is a tool for economic development, especially in smaller towns. And this is not only true for India, this is true globally. So, let me just back up a little bit, if it's okay, Indrajit, why I say this. So smaller towns around the world have faced a brain drain for decades. So the story of smaller towns, people who grew up in smaller towns will identify with this, is you grow up, you finish high school, then you leave for college and you never come back. And then smaller towns have been trying to attract companies for decades, and they pay tax breaks and incentives. And companies say they will set up 5,000 jobs. They take the money, but they set up like 500 jobs. And the argument is we don't have talent. Who should we hire? And young people are leaving because they're saying there are no companies. Where should we work? So it's a chicken and egg problem. And the thesis I've had for a long time is work from anywhere and remote work breaks that vicious cycle. Because now, instead of paying a company hundreds of crores to set up an office, you can attract remote workers to your region, directly pay the individuals. And they already have a job, so they don't have to look for a local job. So this is what the city of Tulsa in Oklahoma did very successfully. They've had a program to attract remote workers since 2019, even before the pandemic. They thought 50 people will come, and they have attracted about 4,000 families so far, which is, in the context of India, not a large number, right. But for the city of Tulsa, that's a very, very healthy number.
Right.
And there are now 50 cities across the US heartland, in Michigan and Ohio and Wisconsin. And in Spain, the region of Extremadura is paying remote workers 16,000 euros to go and live there. And so my argument to the CEA and the officers in the economic cadre was, why can't work from anywhere be used to revitalize smaller towns across India, especially in regions that are struggling to keep its talent? So think about the east of India, for instance, so Bihar, Orissa, and even parts of West Bengal. And there was a very positive acceptance of that thesis, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get to the next stage of our discussions.
What could that mean?
So I'm hoping that, the next step would be to work directly with a couple of states.
Okay.
And if Tulsa remote can be successful, why not pilot something in a couple of states? Of course, it'll need the local state authorities to also participate in this pilot. But I'm hoping that later this year or sometime soon, we can launch these pilots in a couple of Indians' smaller cities.
Terrific. So I'm going to just step back from that question and zoom out a bit and look at what a forward-looking remote work policy framework could look like for India, right? Are there specific levers like maybe digital infrastructure, tax incentives, or even talent mobility rules that you believe the government should prioritize?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Indrajit. So first off, the economic rationale for why, smaller towns and remote workers are a great match is very simple. Smaller towns, the biggest benefit of smaller towns is cost of living. So if you think about housing costs in Mumbai or Noida or Gurgaon and compare it with the housing costs in, Nagpur or Hubli or Durgapur, it's an order of magnitude lower. So for a young person, a young tech worker or a young pharma scientist working on data, it is much more attractive to go and live in a smaller town, especially if they have family around. Because then as someone Hillary Clinton famously said, you need a village to raise a child, right? So if you have your folks around you and the cost of living is lower, it's a great quality of life for a young person. The only thing they don't have is jobs, but the remote work already has jobs. Now, what the government needs to do is very simple. It needs to develop two things: digital infrastructure in the form of co-working spaces, because like I said before in the first episode, work from anywhere doesn't mean work from home. So in Tulsa, actually, the remote workers don't work from home. Tulsa has created a world-class co-working space called 36 Degrees North. So they have world-class Wi-Fi. They have rooms where you can have confidential discussions with your team. They have all the amenities of a beautiful office. And so people go and work there. And what's happening in the US now is many hotel chains are developing co-working spaces. Because if you think about a city like Bokaro or Rourkela, their hotels have an occupancy mismatch based on the season.
Yeah.
So why not convert part of the hotel space into a co-working space where local remote workers can go work throughout the year? That'll give them a baseline occupancy. And then the city needs to invest a little bit in health and recreation.
Got it.
And then what will happen is, after a few thousand people move to that town, there'll be additional demand for all kinds of services: childcare, grocery, schools, and the local economy will start getting lifted up.
Got it. We've kind of studied Zoho very closely because that's kind of led the push into smaller towns, except that they haven't necessarily adopted work from anywhere. They're setting up offices there, and they've had some challenges in setting up too many small offices where there is not enough scope for socialization. Because if the 6 people coming into that office are doing all different things, then there's no chemistry and no conversation per se. So they've learned some lessons, but work from anywhere, I'm not sure. Maybe there's something there that is worth exploring. I just kind of have one last question on this segment, which is that, for long India's aspired to be the back office of the world. Do you really believe that we have a chance to become the front office too through globally distributed knowledge work?
Absolutely, because we have the talent. And by the way, on the back office, India is quietly leading the global capability center conversation. And when I speak to the policymakers, they don't want to talk about it because they don't want competition from Philippines and other countries. But the digital twin thing we talked about last week, it's actually happening in India with the GCCs.
Yeah.
Now, on the front office, for sure, sales is a function which is now being done from anywhere.
Right.
And so I think, India has the opportunity to sort of, amplify its gig economy by sort of focusing on, today, the work from anywhere startups don't care where you are. So why not India, like India has become the MTurk capital of the world, India can become the work from anywhere capital of the world.
Terrific, terrific. We'll just shift gears to another topic that generated some conversation in our community after your essay and your extract was published, and this is the whole issue around inclusion and access for marginalized groups. So one of our community members, who's a social entrepreneur, pretty well known, Meera Shenoy, she's the founder of Youth for Jobs. She posted a question both on LinkedIn and on Facebook, which basically she works with young people with disabilities to improve their livelihoods. Do you see work from anywhere creating new pathways for such underserved talent pools?
Absolutely. And I should thank Meera for that wonderful question. And so there is now very solid research showing that people with any kind of disability prefer work from anywhere. And so one of the studies I recently looked at neurodiverse people. And neurodiverse people in the UK, for the first time, are now seeing employment rates go up. Because think about a neurodiverse person. They don't want to work in a large, bustling city. They don't want to commute in a very crowded train or bus or even a shared car every day. So I think work from anywhere creates, a wonderful way of diversifying the workforce in many ways, in terms of gender, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of languages. Because if you are a work from anywhere startup, then you are hiring from all over the country. So you're getting people not only speaking one local language, but languages all over the country. But also you're getting people with different kinds of disabilities and neurodiverse people as well.
Right. So just to kind of pick up on that, I mean, what do you think companies can do structurally and maybe culturally to become more intentional about hiring people with disabilities in a work from anywhere model?
Yes, I think just having a work from anywhere policy itself will attract such people. That's the
Okay.
simple truth.
Okay.
And I think it's, so I worked with, Sudeep, who's the CEO of ITC Infotech.
Right.
And ITC Infotech implemented a work from anywhere policy. And I think one of the pilots that Sudeep was running was to hire from the northeast of the country because I don't think traditionally had focused on that region. So, he's a young CEO who's taking that bold step in the Indian context. And I would encourage other CEOs to step up because if you hire a diverse workforce, we talked about innovation the last time, diversity is the biggest driver of innovation.
Right. No, no, absolutely. So, given the fact that you spoke about ITC, and I'm sure you've done work and had conversations with many other Indian companies, if there was a set of sectors that you think are ready to leap, whether it's IT, infra, public utilities, which one would you prioritize and why?
I would say tech for sure, because tech is a trusted and proven model. I would say the government sector, because I know it's harder to do maybe in the Indian context, but the economic logic is very strong in the government sector. You cannot pay the same private sector salaries. So flexibility can compensate for that. Uh, and that's what's happening with the European Central Bank, for instance. Now they are competing and attracting talent that would have otherwise gone to Deutsche Bank or Goldman Sachs in Europe. I would say we talked about the digital twins. So I would say all kinds of manufacturing, all kinds of utilities, all kinds of healthcare operations. The window is short because, like Energesia, there will be global leaders in the next 3 years. So, Indian companies, this should be a boardroom discussion. Can we become the digital twin pioneer in our industry?
Brilliant.
And the last thing I'll say, Indrajit, is there is also a whole wave of automation coming in call centers. So call center employee jobs will be at stake because of call center automation. I recently did a project in a call center in Kolkata where we used a bot to simulate the call center agents very successfully.
Right.
And I think this is something that corporate India should take heed because hundreds of thousands of jobs will be at stake. So, there's a real need to reskill, upskill these people so that they can become work for anywhere employees for higher level tech positions soon.
Got it. Got it. If I hear you, you're also trying to kind of suggest that we need to think beyond just a cost arbitrage to a far more innovation arbitrage, if I may put it. Would you agree with that? That that's something that Indian companies need to aspire to do increasingly.
Absolutely, because I think my logic for work from anywhere has always been that a person should be paid for the work they do, not for the location they live in. So as an economist, the mental model I have is if a job is supply constrained, if you cannot find enough people for the job, there's no reason you should pay that person less because they're living in a lower cost of living location. So if India can strategically position itself for these, for instance, let's take the example of digital twin jobs, which need some new reskilling. So now you don't only rely on your turbine knowledge, you're combining turbine technology knowledge with knowledge of interpreting machine learning data. And that's a rare skill. So if India can create enough such people, they can be running power plants all over the world, sitting in second tier, third tier Indian cities, and they should be paid global salaries. Absolutely.
Terrific. Terrific. So if there are any elements of this India's global playbook for remote leadership, what are some of the elements that you would pick up?
I would say it's, at a high level,
Yeah.
policymakers should identify the industries that are going for this model. And I
Yeah.
would say there are plenty. We've talked about a few.
Yeah.
The second step should be, what is the reskilling, upskilling curriculum?
Right.
So you take an electrical engineer, what else does that person need to know to operate a digital twin in Bahrain or somewhere else? What does a doctor in India need to know to run an emergency, remote emergency room somewhere else? And then train these people in that reskilling, upskilling curriculum. And then I would say the next step is let them live in a cheaper city that's closer to family and build the digital infrastructure there to support the kind of work they're doing. And I would say not only large companies, but this idea should spawn many startups in India,
Got it.
which can form these business models. And then they're not fighting the return to office because they are new companies. They can be greenfield work from anywhere.
That's right. Brilliant. I'll move to the last segment, Prithviraj, which is essentially where you're currently based, and you, of course, do work around the world, but HBS. And the question is, how is HBS evolving to prepare future leaders for this kind of decentralized model?
Yeah, so of course, it's a sensitive question, and I
Right.
should be thoughtful in my
Sure, sure,
response. So,
sure.
but one thing I can proudly say, and I've taught in the executive program at HBS for many years, in the PLD program, uh, that HBS has a wonderful model of education that is hybrid in the executive side. So, just to give you the example of PLD where I've taught, it has multiple modules. Many of the modules you can do from anywhere in the world. And then you come together for a couple of weeks, I think twice, where
Right.
you have this deep social experience. And that is exactly what I've been advocating, for instance, in my monthly hybrid or quarterly hybrid model,
Got
that
it.
you can do a lot of the learning from anywhere, but then the social ties that you need to know so that you can leverage your classroom network,
Networks.
that
Yeah.
can happen if you are intensely together for a whole week. And the same model can be replicated for corporate India. That once you spend a week with your team in Goa, and I remember the McKinsey retreats back
Right.
in the late 90s in Goa, where we saw our partners participating on the ramp, modeling clothes. And the kind of bond you develop in that experience, you don't get it 9 to 5.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think HBS has already done that for education. HBS has pioneered HBX, which Bharat
Bharat.
had pioneered.
Yeah.
And now I think the HBX courses are being taught worldwide. So I think in terms of incorporating digital education and the hybrid model, HBS has done a
And
wonderful job in the years before.
what is the most exciting thing to your or project, or an idea that you're particularly tuned into while Bharat and you and others are kind of shaping the future? Anything specific that you're particularly excited about? What the
I
future
think
holds?
that
Yeah.
the next step would be, if you think about management education or education per se, I think that game changer is generative AI.
Right.
And what I'm looking for are business models where there are greenfield universities that put Gen AI and digital learning into its DNA. And how can we disrupt the 4 year, 3 year, 2 year courses using a distributed model and using generative AI? I think that
Yeah.
is what I'm looking out for. And if there are good
Brilliant.
examples I should study, let me know, Indrajit.
Yes, of course. This is going to be the next frontier, as it were. I had a personal question. I know you've been a very strong advocate for flexibility and flexible work. How do you personally walk the talk?
Yeah, so I, travel around the world. I'm also like, I love other parts of my work life. So I'm also a writer, poet, and also a singer-songwriter.
Wow.
So I have, I play with a band. I write songs in Bangla, my mother tongue,
Wow.
and I've taken calls, work calls from studios in New York, for instance. So I live the work from anywhere mantra pretty closely.
Fantastic. This is exciting. So I had a couple of questions for our community. Where can our members of our community find your book and your research, and where can they follow you?
Yeah, so you can find all my work on my webpage. So and also the book is now available widely in India. So the book is called "The World Is Your Office." It's published by the Harvard Business Press, but it's being distributed by Penguin Random House across bookstores and on Amazon India. So it's called "The World Is Your Office." So please read the book, post a review, let me know what you think.
Terrific, terrific. We'd love to hear from all of you who kind of tuned in today what your own ideal setup looks like. Share with us on our social media using the hashtag "The World Is Your Office." And thank you, Prithviraj. This was frankly a masterclass on how we should live and work, and why we should think about work from anywhere as a concept and integrate that into our lives. For our listeners and the folks who are watching, if you haven't read his essay on founding fuel, and check out his book, The World Is Your Office, and let us know what your ideal work future might look like. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you so much, Prithviraj.
Thank you so much.